Sold for being black and barren, the trembling girl stands defiantly on the auction block as cruel voices mock her fourth failed placement. The townspeople sneer with familiar cruelty. She's damaged goods, destined to pass from one disgusted owner to another until she's finally discarded completely. But when the weathered rancher steps forward with 5 desperate children clinging to his coat, everything shifts. He doesn't see a burden. He sees salvation for his dying ranch and motherless family. What the crowd doesn't know is that this worthless woman possesses knowledge that could transform their struggling frontier community, or destroy the very foundations of everything they believe. Will her hidden brilliance be the miracle this broken family needs, or will the town's hatred crush them all before the truth emerges? Before we continue, comment where you are tuning in from. Perhaps we will publish a story there. The dust swirled around Clara Jackson's worn boots as she climbed the wooden steps to the auction block for the 4th time. Her spine remained straight despite the jeers from the gathered crowd. 3 previous owners had returned her within months, each citing the same complaints. Sheriff Tobin Graves cleared his throat and addressed the sparse audience. His weathered face showed no sympathy as he listed her supposed defects. Too proud, disobedient, barren. The words hung in the hot afternoon air like vultures circling carrion. Clara's dark eyes swept across the familiar faces below. Mrs. Henderson clutched her parasol tighter, whispering poison to her neighbor. The banker, Mr. Cromwell, shook his head in disgust. Even young Tommy Fletcher threw a pebble at her feet while his mother smiled approvingly. She had learned to hide her intelligence years ago. The second time she corrected an owner's arithmetic, she earned a week of punishment meals. When she suggested a better crop rotation to the 3rd owner, he threatened to sell her south. Now she stood silent, letting them assume what they wished. The bidding started at $5. Benjamin, 10, coughed constantly from working in dusty conditions. 7-year-old Willow had grown quiet and withdrawn. Eli studied Clara on the platform. Something about her posture suggested strength rather than defeat. Her eyes held intelligence that most people seemed to miss entirely. When Sheriff Graves mentioned her literacy, the crowd scoffed. When he listed her supposed stubbornness, Eli heard determination. The sheriff dropped the starting bid to $3. Still no takers. Eli climbed down from his wagon and walked toward the platform. The crowd parted, some nodding respectfully at the known rancher. Others whispered warnings about the woman's previous failures. Martha grabbed her father's sleeve. Her face showed panic at the thought of another change, another person who might disappoint them. Samuel watched with curiosity. The younger children pressed closer together. Clara observed the approaching family with sharp attention. The children showed signs of neglect, but not abuse. Their father's clothes were worn from honest work, not laziness. She noticed the way he moved with purpose, rather than the swagger she had seen in previous owners. Sheriff Graves brightened when he saw a potential buyer approaching. He began reciting Clara's work history again, emphasizing each returned placement as proof of her inadequacy. The crowd murmured agreement. Eli raised his hand before the sheriff finished speaking. He offered $4 without negotiation or inspection. Several townspeople called out warnings about taking damaged goods. Others suggested he could find better help elsewhere. Clara stepped down from the platform and approached Eli's wagon. She moved with dignity that seemed to irritate the watching crowd even more. When she reached the wagon, she looked directly at each child. Martha crossed her arms and turned away. Samuel met her gaze with cautious interest. Grace peeked out from behind her older brother. Benjamin coughed into his sleeve, and Clara noticed the sound came from deep in his chest. Willow stared with open curiosity. The 20-mile journey. When they stopped to rest the horses, Clara helped Benjamin drink water slowly to ease his coughing. She showed Grace a pattern in the clouds that helped predict weather. She answered Samuel's questions about cattle behavior with knowledge that surprised him. Martha remained coldly distant, but Clara noticed her listening to every conversation. As Thunder Ridge Ranch came into view, Clara saw the full scope of the challenge ahead. The main house needed repairs. Outbuildings sagged from neglect. Gardens lay overgrown with weeds. Account books probably told an even grimmer story. But she also saw potential that nobody else recognized. The land itself was rich and well-positioned. The children were intelligent, despite their interrupted education. Eli worked hard, even if he lacked certain knowledge. Most importantly, Clara possessed skills that could transform everything. Years of secret education had given her knowledge of medicine, mathematics, agriculture, and literature. She could teach, heal, organize, and lead. The question was whether this family and community would let her use those abilities, or whether prejudice would destroy them all before the truth emerged. Within 2 days at Thunder Ridge Ranch, Clara had quietly assessed every problem plaguing the Thatcher family. The account books lay scattered across Eli's desk, filled with numbers that told a story of steady decline. She could read every entry while Eli struggled with the simplest calculations. The revelation came by accident. Eli sat hunched over a letter from the bank, his finger tracing each word slowly. Clara approached with coffee and glanced at the document. Without thinking, she read the entire contents aloud in seconds. Eli's head snapped up. His eyes widened as he realized what had just happened. Clara froze, expecting anger or suspicion. Instead, he pushed another letter toward her. She read it fluently, then another, and another. Years of hiding melted away as Clara demonstrated literacy that surpassed most townspeople. Eli stared in amazement at her mother's death. She watched Clara explain mathematical concepts with patience that no adult had shown the children in years. Samuel asked question after question about ranch management, receiving answers that demonstrated deep understanding of livestock and agriculture. Clara's medical knowledge emerged when she noticed Benjamin's persistent cough. She had learned healing arts from Mama Rose, an elderly midwife who had delivered half the babies in 3 counties. During long nights caring for sick mothers and infants, Clara memorized symptoms, treatments, and herbal remedies. She prepared a tea from wild cherry bark and honey for Benjamin's chest congestion. Within hours, his breathing improved noticeably. Martha found Clara checking his pulse and temperature with the skill of a trained physician. The ranch transformation began immediately. Clara reorganized the entire operation, using principles she had learned from agricultural texts Adelaide once shared. She implemented a water management system that directed precious rainfall to areas that needed it most. Sick cattle recovered under her care, using treatments that combined traditional knowledge with practical observation. She showed Samuel how to rotate livestock through different pastures to prevent overgrazing and disease. Crop yields increased as she taught proper spacing and soil management techniques. Eli watched these changes with growing amazement and gratitude. His children blossomed under Clara's patient teaching. Their evening lessons became the highlight of each day, filled with stories, songs, and knowledge that opened new worlds to their young minds. But success brought dangerous attention from the surrounding community. Neighbors noticed the sudden improvements at Thunder Ridge Ranch. The Thatcher children began outperforming town students whenever they attended church or community gatherings. Reverend Caldwell preached sermons about maintaining proper social order. He spoke of unnatural arrangements that disrupted God's intended hierarchy. His words carried clear warnings about the consequences of allowing certain people to rise above their designated stations. Sheriff Graves received regular complaints about the situation at Thunder Ridge spread as she taught basic medical care to other ranch wives. She showed them how to treat common injuries and illnesses that could become dangerous without proper attention. Several families credited Clara with saving their children during an outbreak of fever that struck the area. Martha's transformation became the most dramatic change at Thunder Ridge. The bitter, exhausted teenager slowly emerged from her shell as Clara shouldered the household burdens with competent care. Martha began helping with lessons, discovering her own talent for teaching younger children. Samuel embraced ranch management with confidence as Clara shared knowledge that his father had never possessed. Grace flourished under mathematical instruction that challenged her quick mind. Benjamin's health improved steadily with proper medical attention. 7-year-old Willow attached herself to Clara with complete devotion. She followed her everywhere, absorbing songs, stories, and gentle wisdom. For the first time since her mother's death, Willow laughed and played with genuine joy. Eli found himself depending on Clara's judgment for major ranch decisions. Her advice proved consistently sound, whether dealing with livestock purchases, crop planning, or financial management. The failing ranch began generating actual profit for the first time in years, but prosperity made them targets. The established social order could not tolerate such obvious success from an arrangement that challenged fundamental assumptions about race, education, and proper roles. Storm clouds gathered as jealousy and prejudice combined into a dangerous threat that could destroy everything Clara had built. The winter storm struck Thunder Ridge Ranch with brutal force in early February. Snow piled against the windows while wind howled through every crack in the old house. Benjamin's persistent cough had worsened over 3 days, developing into deep, rattling sounds that terrified his siblings. Clara recognized the symptoms immediately. His fever spiked dangerously high, while his breathing became shallow and labored. Pneumonia had claimed many lives during her years with Mama Rose, but she had also seen recoveries when proper care was applied quickly. The medical knowledge came flooding back from nights spent with Mama Rose during epidemic seasons. Clara had been barely 12 when cholera struck the plantation, but she remembered every detail of treatments that saved lives when doctors were unavailable or unwilling to help. She prepared poultices from mustard seed and flour to draw congestion from Benjamin's chest. Teas made from willow bark reduced his fever, while honey and lemon soothed his raw throat. Most importantly, she maintained constant vigilance, adjusting his position every hour to prevent fluid from settling in his lungs. Martha refused to leave her brother's bedside. She watched Clara work with growing amazement, finally understanding that this woman possessed skills that could mean the difference between life and death. The hostility that had defined their relationship melted away as Martha witnessed genuine love and competence. Clara shared stories from her time with Mama Rose during the long night hours. She had learned medicine by necessity when epidemics swept through communities that lacked proper medical care. Plantation owners called for Mama Rose when their own children fell ill, despite their usual disdain for her healing knowledge. The old midwife had recognized Clara's quick mind and gentle hands. She taught her to read symptoms that others missed, to prepare remedies from common plants, and to provide comfort during the darkest hours of illness. Clara became her assistant during difficult births and dangerous fevers. When Clara was caught reading medical texts by lamplight, punishment followed swiftly. But the knowledge remained, growing stronger through years of careful observation and practice. She had saved lives at every placement, though credit always went to others or was dismissed as lucky coincidence. Benjamin's crisis deepened during the second night. His fever reached dangerous levels, while his breathing became increasingly difficult. Clara applied cool cloths to reduce his temperature, while keeping his chest warm with heated stones wrapped in cloth. She taught Martha and Samuel how to help with the constant care. They learned was Benjamin's only hope, since the town doctor had refused to come. Her treatments were clearly helping, as the boy's breathing had improved steadily over the past day. The sheriff's visit revealed the growing scrutiny that Thunder Ridge Ranch faced from the community. Other families had begun questioning how Clara possessed such extensive medical knowledge. Rumors spread about unnatural abilities and dangerous practices that threatened proper social order. Clara ignored the suspicion and focused entirely on Benjamin's recovery. On the fourth morning, his fever finally broke, while his breathing cleared significantly. The crisis had passed, leaving behind a weak but recovering child who would live to see another spring. Martha threw her arms around Clara with tears of gratitude and relief. For the first time since her mother's death, she had witnessed care that matched a parent's love. Samuel and Grace crowded close, finally understanding that Clara had become far more than hired help. Even Eli struggled with emotion as he watched his son sleep peacefully for the first time in days. Clara's medical knowledge had achieved what the town's trained physician could or would not attempt. Her value to the family now seemed immeasurable. But Benjamin's recovery only intensified community suspicion. Word spread quickly about the miraculous healing that occurred without proper medical supervision. Some townspeople began questioning their assumptions about Clara's abilities. Others doubled down on prejudice, insisting that such results could only come from forbidden practices. The stage was set for confrontation, as jealousy and fear combined into dangerous opposition that threatened to destroy everything Clara had built with the Thatcher family. By spring, Thunder Ridge Ranch had become the most prosperous operation in 3 counties. Clara's innovations transformed every aspect of the struggling farm into a model of efficiency and productivity. Crop yields increased by 40%, while livestock mortality dropped to nearly 0. The Thatcher children now outperformed every student in the territorial school system. Martha had developed into a confident young woman who helped teach the challenges. The success bred dangerous resentment throughout the surrounding community. Neighboring ranchers watched their own operations decline in comparison to Thunder Ridge's obvious prosperity. Merchants noticed that Eli made increasingly sophisticated purchasing decisions that saved money and improved efficiency. Sheriff Graves received regular complaints about the unnatural situation developing at the Thatcher Ranch. Town leaders worried about the precedent being set when established social hierarchies were openly challenged. The school board demanded explanations for how isolated ranch children could surpass their properly educated peers. Reverend Caldwell intensified his Sunday sermons about maintaining God's intended order. He spoke of dangerous influences that corrupted innocent minds and disrupted communities. His words carried obvious warnings about the consequences of allowing certain arrangements to continue unchallenged. Clara began finding her past under intense scrutiny as Sheriff Graves contacted her previous owners. He sought evidence of wrongdoing or character defects that could justify removing her from the territory. Each investigation revealed the same pattern of returned placements, blamed on pride and disobedience. The truth about Clara's educational background slowly emerged through Graves' inquiries. Adelaide Whitmore's father confirmed that his daughter had been caught teaching their help to read and write. He described the arrangement as dangerous corruption that threatened proper social boundaries. Other former owners admitted that Clara had demonstrated unusual knowledge of medicine, mathematics, and literature. They had returned her not because she was incompetent, but because her abilities made them uncomfortable. A servant who could read contracts and calculate figures posed threats they preferred to avoid. Clara continued her work despite growing pressure from the community. She treated injured ranch hands with medical skills that surpassed many trained physicians. Her evening classes grew as more families sought education for their children that the territorial school system failed to provide. The personal bonds within the Thatcher family deepened as Clara became their anchor and guide. Eli relied completely on her judgment for major decisions about ranch throughout the county. Her agricultural innovations spread to other farms as desperate ranchers copied techniques that produced obvious results. Water management systems, crop rotation methods, and livestock care practices developed at Thunder Ridge became models that improved productivity across the region. The lending library evolved into an informal school that challenged the territorial education system. Children who attended Clara's Sunday lessons consistently outperformed their peers in every academic subject. Parents began questioning why official schools produced inferior results. Clara's growing reputation created a crisis for established authorities who depended on maintaining existing power structures. Her success proved that intelligence and capability had nothing to do with race or social position. Such evidence threatened fundamental beliefs that justified inequality and oppression. During quiet moments in Sarah Thatcher's former sewing room, Clara discovered a wooden chest hidden beneath loose floorboards. The container held personal documents, letters, and legal papers that Sarah had kept separate from other family records. One sealed envelope bore an inscription that made Clara's hands tremble. The careful handwriting read, "To my sister, if God wills we meet." Inside, she found a letter, dated just months before Sarah's death, along with legal documents that would change everything. The letter revealed Sarah's desperate search for a half-sister sold away years earlier. She had traced Clara's movements through several owners, always arriving too late to make contact. The legal papers named Clara as guardian for the Thatcher children should anything happen to Eli. Clara realized that her connection to this family ran deeper than employment or even friendship. Sarah had been searching for her own blood relative, driven by guilt and love to reunite their separated family. The children she had grown to love were actually her nieces and nephews. The discovery came at the worst possible time. Sheriff Graves was building his case to remove Clara from the territory permanently. The community pressure had reached dangerous levels that threatened Sarah to spend years tracking Clara's movements from owner to owner. The letter expressed profound regret for arriving too late at each location. Sarah had missed Clara by months at the first placement, by weeks at the second, and by mere days at the third. Each near miss had intensified her determination to find her lost sister and make amends for their father's cruelty. Most shocking of all were the legal documents Sarah had prepared in secret. She had named Clara as legal guardian for all 5 children, bypassing traditional inheritance laws through careful legal maneuvering. If anything happened to Eli, Clara would have full authority over the children's welfare and education. Clara understood that Sarah had suspected her own failing health. The documents were dated just 2 months before Sarah's death from fever, suggesting she had prepared for the worst while hoping for the best. She had tried to protect her children by ensuring their care would pass to someone with both love and capability. The timing of this discovery could not have been worse. Sheriff Graves had spent weeks building his case against Clara, gathering testimony from former owners and community members who wanted her removed from the territory. His investigation had revealed her educational background and medical knowledge, which he portrayed as dangerous deceptions. The morning of reckoning arrived with thunderclouds gathering over Thunder Ridge Ranch. Sheriff Graves rode up the main road with a posse of 6 men, all armed, and determined to settle the Clara question permanently. Behind them came a wagon carrying members of the Territorial Council who would oversee her removal. Eli met them in the front yard with quiet dignity, flanked by his 5 children who refused to remain inside. Martha stood tall beside her father, no longer the broken teenager who had first met Clara. Samuel, Grace, Benjamin, and Willow formed a protective line that showed their complete loyalty to the woman who had transformed their lives. Sheriff Graves announced the charges with obvious satisfaction. Practicing medicine without license, teaching without proper credentials, and removed Sarah's letter with steady hands. Her voice carried clearly across the yard as she read the contents aloud, revealing the family connection that no one had suspected. Gasps and murmurs rippled through the gathering as the truth emerged. The legal documents followed, each page carefully explained as Clara demonstrated the education that had so threatened the established order. She cited territorial laws, inheritance statutes, and guardianship regulations with precision that impressed even hostile observers. Martha stepped forward at the crucial moment, her voice strong and clear as she addressed the crowd. She declared her family's choice to remain with Clara, describing the transformation that had saved them all from poverty and despair. Samuel, Grace, Benjamin, and Willow echoed her words with unwavering support. Eli produced the ranch account books that told the story of their incredible turnaround. Every entry was written in Clara's careful handwriting, documenting the financial management that had transformed a failing operation into the county's most successful ranch. The evidence of her contributions became undeniable. The crowd's mood began shifting as the full scope of Clara's impact became clear. Parents whose children had benefited from her informal education spoke up reluctantly. Neighbors whose families she had treated during illness admitted her medical skills had saved lives. The lending library and Sunday lessons had touched nearly every family in the county. Sheriff Graves found his case crumbling as community support wavered. The legal documents establishing Clara's guardianship were properly executed and witnessed. Her family connection to the Thatcher children provided legitimate grounds for her authority over their welfare. More damaging to Graves' position were the questions about his own motives that began emerging from the crowd. Why was he so determined to remove someone who had brought obvious benefits to the entire community? What personal interest did he have in seeing the Thatcher ranch fail or change hands? Clara's final revelation struck like lightning across the gathering. She produced correspondence between Sheriff Graves and land speculators who wanted to purchase Thunder Ridge Ranch. Removal had been exposed with devastating clarity. The land speculation documents bore his signature, alongside promises of substantial payment for facilitating the property transfer. Judge Morrison, the senior council member, examined Clara's legal documents with growing amazement. Sarah Thatcher's guardianship papers were properly executed and witnessed, according to territorial law. The family connection between the sisters provided legitimate grounds for Clara's authority over the children's welfare and education. Sheriff Graves attempted to dismiss the evidence as forgeries, created by a desperate woman facing removal. His protests fell on deaf ears as community members recognized Sarah's distinctive handwriting and recalled her mysterious trips to town during her final months. The pieces of her secret search for Clara finally made sense. The crowd's transformation was swift and decisive. Parents whose children had benefited from Clara's education stepped forward to testify about her positive impact. Mrs. Henderson admitted that Clara's medical treatment had saved her youngest son during a bout with scarlet fever. Even Reverend Caldwell acknowledged the improved moral character of children who attended Clara's Sunday lessons. Judge Morrison called for a formal hearing to address all charges against Clara. The proceedings moved to the church, where the entire community could witness the resolution of a case that had divided them for months. Clara sat calmly in the front pew, surrounded by the Thatcher children who refused to leave her side. The testimony revealed the full scope of Clara's contributions to the county's prosperity. Ranch productivity had increased across the region as neighbors copied her agricultural innovations. Infant mortality rates had dropped significantly due to her medical guidance for expectant mothers. Educational achievement among local children had improved dramatically through her informal teaching. Former owners were called to testify about Clara's previous placements. Their reluctant admissions painted a picture of a woman whose intelligence and capabilities had threatened men who preferred subservient help. She had been returned not to commit fraud. The transformation of Thunder Ridge Ranch became a model for the entire territory. Visiting officials arrived regularly to study Clara's methods and document the innovations that had produced such remarkable results. Her water management systems, crop rotation techniques, and livestock care practices were adopted throughout the region. Clara established a permanent school that served children from families of all backgrounds. The territorial government provided funding after recognizing the superior educational outcomes her methods produced. Martha became her assistant teacher, discovering her calling in nurturing young minds and building confident futures. Samuel took on increasing responsibility for ranch management under Clara's guidance. demonstrating the leadership skills that would eventually make him one of the territory's most successful ranchers. Grace pursued advanced mathematical studies that prepared her for a teaching career in the territorial capital. Benjamin's complete recovery from pneumonia became a testament to Clara's medical knowledge. He developed into her dedicated apprentice, learning herbal remedies and treatment techniques that saved lives throughout the county. Willow flourished as the beloved youngest child, who brought joy and laughter back to a family that had nearly lost hope. Eli emerged from his struggles as a confident partner in both the ranch operation and child-rearing responsibilities. Clara's influence had restored his family's prosperity, while teaching him management skills that ensured their continued success. Their partnership became a model of mutual respect and shared responsibility. The lending library evolved into a community center where families gathered for education, medical consultations, and cultural events. Clara's Sunday afternoon programs drew visitors from neighboring counties who came to experience the remarkable transformation of a once struggling frontier settlement. 6 months after the confrontation with Sheriff Graves, Clara stood once again in the town square where she had first been auctioned as unwanted property. This time she occupied the platform as an honored speaker, addressing territorial education officials who sought to replicate first auction. Eli approached the platform with news that the territorial governor wanted to discuss expanding Clara's educational programs to serve the entire region. Her innovations in teaching, medicine, and agriculture had gained recognition that extended far beyond their small community. Clara looked across the faces of people who had once viewed her as damaged goods, destined for failure. Now they sought her guidance and celebrated her achievements as essential contributions to their collective prosperity. The woman who had been sold for being considered worthless had proven that the most discarded seeds often grow into the strongest trees.